Can you all hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, something came up on the screen that I need to take off. Okay,
We hear you.
Yes, we can hear.
okay, because it's noon. I've got 12 o'clock straight up. John, are you here?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes,
Ann? And Halsey? Miguel?
I'm here.
Lupe Costilla?
I'm here.
Margie? Piapando? Okay, it's 12:01. I've got six members present. Maybe Margie will join us later. I don't have any comments for public forum. We'll go on to item 3, discussion/action to pay paraprofessional auxiliary employees time and a half of their hourly rate for each hour worked up to 40 hours per week, beginning on August 4th, 2020 until discontinued by the Board of Trustees.
Ms. Cantu.
Mr. Arredondo?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we authorize the administration to pay auxiliary employees time and a half until discontinued by the Board of Trustees.
Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second? I don't hear a second, Mr. Arredondo.
Okay.
I'm wondering if there was anyone that was going to second that?
Ms. Cantu,
Yes,
for purposes of discussion, I will second that, please.
okay. Ms. Costilla seconds. We can now begin discussion on this item. Anybody wants to have a comment? Please be recognized.
Ms. Cantu.
Mr. Arredondo?
Thank you, Ms. Cantu. So it was my intent or intention, I put this on the agenda for us to discuss and potentially pursue as we reopen our schools and as we bring back, all faculty and staff. I think we've seen this being done in various places and spaces as employers and as a large employer. I think to show our commitment to ISD staff and for their willingness to return to work in person. That's why I put it on today's agenda.
Okay. Anyone else have a question or a comment about this item?
Sure. How many people would this involve and what are the costs?
Mr. Barton, do you
I guess
have a
I'll ask
response?
Mr. Barton.
Yes, ma'am. We were able to research that, and last week it'll be just over 600 people at a cost of about $720,000 a month.
720,000 per month. So the first month would be 720 if it was done for 1 month.
It would be just a bit less than that because it doesn't start on August 1. I believe it was August 4th.
August 4th, which is tomorrow.
But it will be consistently close to $700,000.
Do most of the hourly start tomorrow?
Dr. Bias, can you answer that on start dates so I don't give poor information?
Ms. Bias, are you with us? Ms. Costilla?
Yes.
Ms. Costilla?
Custodians, sorry. So custodians are still continuing work. Bus drivers start, I think, Thursday or next, on the 13th, pardon me, August 13th. Got it.
Okay. Custodians have worked all summer long, right? Ms. Costilla, you had your hand up?
I was just going to ask for right now, exactly what does this cover, the category? Is it just everybody, more, all the support staff as well? Who does this cover when we say hourly employees? Who exactly does that cover?
Ms. Bias, could you answer that? Dr. Bias?
So it's all auxiliary staff, from what I understand is the proposal. That would be transportation, bus drivers, child nutrition, custodial, maintenance.
Does that include any office staff or just auxiliary right there?
No.
What are the, Ms. Cantu, I have some questions. This is,
You're being recognized, Mr. McLaughlin. You could go on.
okay. Why are the transportation workers coming back before the beginning of October? Like, what are they driving? What are we doing?
Mr. Barton, could you answer that?
I also saw Mr. Cardona attempting to speak. Our intention is to use them to support the district in restarting. And so we've talked about using them on campuses as needs arise. We are going to be doing some transportation support for our programs, extracurricular, that are beginning here at the beginning of September, like athletics and band as they design their program out. So it maybe not the full fleet, but we are going to have transportation here and working.
Okay.
Did you want to be recognized? Mr. Cardona, did you have something to say?
Just to add to Mr. Barton, we also have, we have had, I want to say 10 to 15 transportation workers that have been helping with the delivery of food to those communities we identified earlier. They use Suburbans instead of buses, but they've been taking that out to those communities all summer.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions?
Ms. Castillo has a question. I see
Ms.
her hand.
Hanson, you have your hand up. Ms. Hanson? Ms. Hanson? Can't hear you. Hanson?
Yeah, now I unmuted myself. What is being done again? Because someone go over it again. What is being done to keep our buildings safe?
Okay. If you all will bear with me just a second, that might be a good opportunity. It's like a 3-minute, I'll just have a PowerPoint. We've actually been, I mean, as part of our norm, there's things that happen in timeline. And so we met with our principals this morning. So Mr. Fernandez is just going to share quick, and then I'll send this PowerPoint to y'all so y'all have it if you get any questions. So these are currently the things that have been taking place, the summer safety protocols we've had in place. And you know, I won't go over every single one of them, but basically mask required when 6-foot spacing not feasible, clean high touch areas frequently, maintain separate offices when possible, no solicitors allowed, 6-foot signage, floor markers in office, sanitation station areas near entries, majority of interviews or meetings conducted virtually, visitor COVID posters at all entrances, creative scheduling. I'll use central office as the example. Since the pandemic started and we have the smallest amount of space to socially distance, our assistant superintendents and deputy superintendents came up with a schedule with their departments. So we have certain departments come in on certain days. And so that's kind of the logical step that we'll follow with the campuses. And then we do daily self-screening. Anybody that comes in here, we screen. And then we've begun placing plexiglass at certain reception areas. You can see athletics, the campuses and central office have those currently. Maintenance, maintenance kind of shares a facility, so there's not really a maintenance area. And transportation, they have separate offices, so they don't need the plexiglass, and they have space to put people out. And then technology has space to separate. You can go to the next slide, please. And that's kind of the process of cleaning. I think that was your question. And then this is kind of the week at a glance of the phased in return to approach the school. And like I said, I'll send this to you guys as soon as we're done. we got to do some grammatical errors and make sure that everything looks all right. But if you can go to the next slide. It goes all the way through week 11. I will let you know when we talk about the agenda for August, we will have to add a waiver to potentially go week 8 through week 11 if the numbers don't look good in the county. I know that the board gave me the authority to go out that long, but Texas Education Agency actually requires a board-approved waiver. And so Dr. Ruiz Mills will make sure that we add that so that y'all can discuss and take possible action. If you can go to the next slide. This is just kind of the professional development that's district professional development that we need to cover. If you can go to the next slide. This is also another look at the different types of professional development. Next slide. The Safe Schools training, which we just got last night about midnight. This is also required for all teachers and all staff to go through. That's additional. Next slide. And then this is kind of just my thoughts of, I've been working with some other superintendents around the area of what buildings look like if they're at 0% capacity, 25% capacity, 50% capacity, and then 75%. And then what are the requirements we'd have on campus. But be happy to share with that. This is all kind of just in, this is some changes weekly. So to answer your question, Ms. Hansen, these are some of the things we've done and are doing, but some of it is a natural process. So Mr. Wozniak is meeting with the principals this week to go over safety. Mr. Wyatt, our director of maintenance, meets with the principals also this week and next week to kind of get with each campus to become more focused on what those safety protocols look like within the classroom. And they're also on this call in case anybody has any questions. Next slide. And that's it. I hope that answers your question.
Okay.
Ms. Cantu.
Yes. Was that Mr. Arredondo? Or was that what Mr. McLaughlin?
Thank you, Ms. Cantu. Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess this is for Dr. Baez. What guidance or what happens when an ISD employee wants or needs to go get testing from like a local healthcare provider? I know there's like a lot of moving pieces there because of the CARES Act and TRS and things like that. But can you explain to me like how that works for an employee?
So the ones that have been tested or reached out for information, we keep up with all the local clinics and other places. They offer free testing for employees, and then they charge the insurance on the back end. And if there is no insurance, they're taking care of our folks. I can tell you that some of the clinics ran out of tests at some point, different return dates, right? One may be a 20-minute result, we get results in 20 minutes. Others may take 3 to 5 days. When the Coast Guard did their testing, the first round, we had folks reporting back in 15 days. So it's a little different with all of those, but basically they reach out and we kind of walk them through the process of the test, asymptomatic, symptomatic, and then, the leave, the emergency leave that goes with that. And if there's been exposures, we alert all of those folks to exhaust and ensure safety. So we work through every case. It's a case by case, but they all have our contact information. Our lines are and they call, and we track that, every day.
Wonderful. And so I guess I'm curious, as we, discuss reopening the schools and calling back, thousands of employees. I know at the university, at least for the student population, they've, encouraged everyone, if possible, to, self-isolate and quarantine, for up to 2 weeks before, they return to campus. Are we going to ask that our employees get tested before they return, or we just kind of go on the honor system, and if people are, you know, not showing symptoms or don't have fevers, we're just going to bring them back, or what does that look like?
So we're working on an acknowledgement form where basically all of the folks that have been working, they self-test, or there's testing before they enter campuses or departments. And so it'll be similar when everyone returns. So we don't trump the doctor, we heed their advice. Some folks are asymptomatic. Doctor says you can go back as long as we have a note saying you can be, you know, on reporting in, or if you're needing to quarantine, we heed that guidance.
Okay, but as
we ask
far
for
as
copies of that, obviously.
yeah, okay. So as far as like just bringing the staff back and everything like that, it's just obviously go get tested if you think you need to, but other than that, if you're not showing any symptoms, we're just allowing you to return, correct?
Right, and you know that the guidance continues to change. So the guidance is, you know, from the 72-hour to now 48-hour. You know, it just we try to follow all of that, and then again we punt to the medical professional.
Okay, awesome. Like I said, I was just curious because the university again sent out that acknowledgement to staff and students saying, you know, as we prepare to return for the semester, you know, please, you know, self-isolate and limit, you know, any potential opportunities for exposure. So I was just wondering if we were going to send out similar, you know, guidance to ISD employees or anything like that, especially teachers and staff as they're scheduled to come back here in 2 weeks, so that window is quickly closing. But thank you.
Ms. Cantu?
Ms. Thea?
Yes, back to the item for discussion, not that this was not part of it, but regarding the pay. I have questions in regards to that, primarily because I've had some people ask me whether I will support custodians or getting more pay and of the nature of what this particular item is about. Where's the money coming from, Mr. Cardona or Mr. Barton? Where's this money coming from for $720,000 or $750,000 a month?
This would be an expenditure out of the general fund, and I would bring you a budget amendment every month following. So in September, I'll bring you August pay as a budget amendment to be moved from general fund. I think there might be some misconceptions out there that CARES money is there to provide for this type of thing, but in reality, our CARES funding is there for startup of our schools. And I know the superintendent has talked about what we've done, but he didn't always talk about how we funded it. But we basically went one-to-one for grades that weren't and added a great deal of technology and programs to support our students in remote learning with our CARES funding, and also an incredible amount of PPE for our adults as well as our students, dividers and things like that we're planning for from September all the way through the end of the year. We had about $1.6 million allocated to the district, and we've spent about 2/3 of that right now. We have about 1/3 left to make it through the end of the year. We feel like we're right on track with where we want to be, but that's startup money. The money for this premium pay would come out of general fund every single month.
Well, I asked because I think there's some individuals are alluding to the fact that we're holding on to some COVID money that should be used or can be used for staff to increase their pay during this period of time. So I needed to clarify that. I don't want the public to get the idea that we are clinging to any COVID money that we might have or can utilize for that purpose. You're telling me that that's being used for specific purposes, and
yes,
that
ma'am.
you have some left over until the end of the year. I know there's been conversations at the federal level about the stimulus package that, you know, money would be coming in for educational purposes. But as we all know, the educational designation doesn't always include staff or salary. It includes more specifically items that students need. So I just want to make sure, the people that have asked me and inquired about that, and for those individuals and other ones, that we're not hiding any money, that any money that comes out for this kind of pay would be coming out from fund balance that we already, I remember you giving us a breakdown of the financial for basically covering maybe the next 2 years at the time that we passed a budget that included pay for the teachers and support staff. And that has stayed with me, and I shared that with individuals that have called me about that, because I am concerned about, it would be wonderful to give everybody on a short-term basis, to give everybody additional monies during this period of time. In comparison to other employers here, I don't know of any that they are. I just finished working for the university, and nobody got any more additional money, and I don't think even the businesses here in town, the other ones, are doing that. I would like to take care of all the employees if to the highest level if I could, but I also feel that I have to be responsible and not irresponsible in looking out for not just the short term, but the long term. What are the long-term consequences if we were to spend $750,000 a month for, let's say, 3 years, 3 or 4 months or 6 months, and maybe, and I'm assuming that we're going to have to do something for the teachers as well. I'm thinking we cannot be selective. So if we're going to be giving them, we need to give the other ones. So what are we looking at on an average of the impact on our budget?
Okay, and I'm going to frame that in 2 questions if I can. I think I understood you well. First of all, I want to be explicitly clear so that you understand the CARES money that we received is going to our students and our teachers for learning and for health and safety. And so those are our 2 major priorities. We've spent about 2/3 of it to be up and going at startup here at the beginning of the school year, and we have about 1/3 left, and that's looking right about $500,000 to make adjustments as we get more students throughout the year and our needs evolve. We're going to be able to purchase more or different. And we just know this is an evolving situation. So that's how we're using our CARES money. As to the impact on the general fund and on the fund balance that the trustees have, I know we're used to seeing, when we see our summary documents in our budget, that we have close to $40 million. But the truth is there's not an account with $40 million sitting there. That is replenished each year by property taxes. But right now it's at its lowest point because we finished the tax year, but we've been paying salaries and we've been paying for facilities and electricity all summer. Right now we're at about 20 million in cash, and that is spot on 3 months of reserves. So for our expenditures. So we are right where we want to be in our cash reserves right now. And if we add an additional burden of 700,000 onto that for just this month or the month after, we will fall below that level very quickly. And I'd like to say absolutely that will be replenished with property taxes and things like that coming very quickly. But we know that our families and our community is experiencing some difficulty there too. So there are a lot of uncertainties and a lot of unknowns. The district is in a healthy position right now. We are well, and we're able to take care of our kids and provide for our employees. But that is not necessarily an abundance that we can tap into right now.
Well, I know that you made reference when we were passing that budget that given the outlook within the next 2 years, and it looked like it was a bleak outlook, that if we continued on some kind of course as far as not being as conservative as we could with our budget, that we might have to be looking at the possibility of reducing some staff. And that concerns me a lot. As much as I want to give all these employees any additional monies that I know that they are needing, as all of us are. I mean, my husband and I are on a fixed income, so I know how it's like, what that's like. But I'm also concerned because I would think that the majority of our employees would much rather be safe having a job within the next year or 2 years. And that's not a scare tactic. I don't think I want to, but I'm trying to be realistic as to what we can do on a short-term basis for our employees right now. That would be giving them some monies, but the impact of that short-term would be, on the long-term, would be more or less a negative consequence.
I believe you're correct.
I remember your presentation a few months ago. So as I have had these discussions with some individuals, I've mentioned that to them, is that I'm not against giving anybody. I think everybody's will disturbing. But as a prior employee, for me personally, I think I'd much rather make sure that I continue to have my salary for as long as I needed it, rather than be looking at enjoying something on a short-term basis, that not really enjoying it, but needing it, and rather than be looking versus maybe in the long term. I'm real concerned about that, because we do, having the history that we've had in the past, we've been real fruitful with our monies. And I want to make sure that we continue to do that, so our employees will always have stability, the ones that want to continue working for the school district. That's where my concern comes. And like I said, we're going to give a group an increase. We need to be giving the other group an increase as well, because they're going to be there in the front lines as well as these individuals are. I speak from having been a custodian when I was very young. I worked in a cafeteria when I was very young. I worked as a support staff to put myself through college. So I've worn those shoes before. So I know what it's like when money is not at the rate that it should be for some other people. But once again, that's where my concern is. And I want to make sure that if I'm going to make a decision, that I'm making it with the numbers that you're giving me in mind before I decide that I want to do that. And like I mentioned to a lot of people, or the ones that have contacted me, if I decide on one thing, it doesn't mean that I'm against you. It just means that I'm looking out for the security of the school district. I'm just not wanting to be popular right now. I want to make sure that you're understanding, because I'm looking out for your future as well.
Mr.
So I kind of wanted to cover that, because like I said, I've had these conversations with individuals already. And I think that the mindset out there is that we're holding on to money. We don't want to pay. We have a healthy fund balance. These are bad times, and the school district should do all it can. I understand that. I know that very well. But at the same time, there are consequences if we were to just go forward and do everything what we wanted to do, as far as, I mean, the bank can only, or the pocket can only hold so much money. And I've been through that process already. So I know that the money is spent very quickly. It takes a long time to accumulate, but it's spent very quickly.
Ms. Cantu.
Mr. McLaughlin was next, Mr. Arredondo, if you would wait.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm opposed to this idea. I don't think it's wise or warranted. We've spent the last 5 years modernizing our pay scales, and our auxiliary and hourly employees have had a larger increase both in real dollars and percentage over the last 5 years than any 5-year period in history. And that's good on the board, and a product of good fiscal management in prior years that we were able to do that. So our lowest wages have increased by almost 50% over the relevant time period. So we've modernized our pay scales, so nobody is working, for $8 or numbers that we would prefer to pay more than. And then additionally, as an employer, we took incredible care financially of our auxiliary staff and hourly folks. We stopped coming to school on March 12th, if I recall, yet no one missed pay. Their insurance was covered by the district, so they could get health care if they were to get sick, and their pay was uninterrupted, even though they were not working for a large portion of that time. So now we as an employer have all the money that we can spend. We need to spend on keeping people safe and returning in a safe manner. I don't want anybody to get COVID-19 at work. And if they did, getting a couple more bucks an hour would not be fair compensation. So I would prefer to spend that money lowering the risk that someone was going to get sick, rather than, I guess the thinking is that by paying more, that's to acknowledge that they're entering a more risky environment. I would rather make it a less risky environment, because whatever you can't just compensate that with pay. And lastly, we're in a very uncertain financial time. We passed a deficit budget. So every month we did this, we would be going into the hole $750,000 every month. It would last at least 2 months, because we're not even returning to school in person till October 4th. we don't know what our financial picture is going to be like. We don't know how this is going to impact tax collections. We don't know what our enrollment numbers are going to look like. I mean, we've had folks looking at homeschool options, pod options, looking for all sorts of options for their kids. And if we lose 500 kids in enrollment, it'll devastate our budget. So at a time like that, I just don't see that this is wise. We don't have the money, and I would prefer to spend what money we do have keeping people safe. Thank you.
Ms. Hanson, you had your hand up.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I agree with Mr. McLaughlin. Looking at potential taxes or income from different sources. We don't know. I mean, we know a lot of companies are going bankrupt, and I'm sure a lot of our businesses are struggling, if not have already closed. Companies are also merging with other companies, big companies trying to stay afloat. I would prefer that we keep the money in case we have big changes in our tax rate, our taxable
Revenue.
income, and make sure that we're able to keep all of our staff on staff so that they can continue working with these really uncertain times, and especially like we already have a deficit budget. Mr. Barton, can you remind us how much our deficit budget is?
Yes, ma'am. We passed a budget with a deficit of $1,390,961.
Thank you. So I have concerns, yes, it will go up once we start receiving our income from different or taxable income, but I know they're going to certify the rolls, but I filed a protest back in May and they still don't have a date for me at this point because they're so far behind. So I know they'll count off some on the certified rolls, but even those aren't going to be as accurate as they should be. So I just want to make sure that all of our staff we're doing the things to keep them safe and healthy and able to continue working. Thank you.
Mr. Arredondo, you were trying to speak a while ago.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Cantu. So I agree with the concerns expressed by John and Lupe and Kathy. I guess the purpose or the intent or the logic behind this item and the subsequent discussion is several months ago when we closed the schools because of the ongoing public health crisis, this board voted unanimously to provide premium pay for hourly employees at a rate of 1.5 times their hourly rate. We didn't know financially what that was going to look like, but we did it because we knew calling these employees to work in person was going to expose them to, the additional risks of working in person. And so this board, again, took this exact same action at the front end of the pandemic, at the front end of this public health crisis. And we saw that after that money was approved, that hourly rate increase was approved, after premium pay was approved by this board, we saw departments keep their staff at home. We saw employees able to do their job functions from the safety of their homes. And we also did not increase the way in which our food service department provided meals to families under the guise of we were going to expose them to a greater risk if we had them delivering meals or working at more sites or having more employees in our cafeterias. So it's interesting to me that when we closed the schools and kept everybody at home, we authorized premium pay for those workers who were returning. And now as we open the schools and as the numbers have not gotten better, and as we've seen the Latino community in particular disproportionately impacted by this public health crisis, we are again calling all of these employees back to work. So my hope is that the essential staff who are already there, the custodians, the maintenance employees, the ones who have to do their job in person, that we pay them accordingly, because quite frankly, I do see this as hazard pay for them, especially as children and staff in mass return to our schools. It's going to be our custodians who expose themselves every day, cleaning every surface after every child and adult who enters our schools. And more so, I hope that this is a financial incentive for departments and divisions across the ISD to keep their hourly employees at home, but still doing their work. It was accomplished in the spring, so I hope it can be accomplished in the fall. I would just hope that we would not bring all 700 hourly employees back for in-person work if they're able to do it from home. But those who have to complete their job functions in person, I think they should receive pay accordingly, because the risks will exponentially increase as staff return to campus, and as projected, children return in October. So that's, there's a way to amend the motion if Castilla is interested. And she's the second is, I assume auxiliary staff are all hourly employees. I thought it included clerical, so I'd want to amend my motion to include our clerical staff as well.
You want to amend this motion to say what again?
So it was the intent of my motion that auxiliary also covered clerical employees as well. So if I need to amend my motion that we approve time and 1/2 for auxiliary, maintenance, manual trades, clerical, I want the motion to encapsulate all hourly employees.
We have to have a second on that amendment. Ms. Halsey, you second that amendment? Okay, thank you. Ms. Costilla, were you trying to speak?
Yes, I was trying to say something.
Go ahead.
I firmly believe that there is no colleague on this board that is not sensitive and appreciative and empathetic and sympathetic to our employees that are out there. I have no doubt. We have, once again, I think this board has continued to be focused on providing for our employees. I would like, in comparison to another institution here that has never really done that, what we have done for our employees, we have done everything that we can for them. And I don't think that in a way that we would be able to responsibly act in the manner that, yes, we are thinking about their safety, but whether you're making $10 or $5, it's not going to keep you from getting COVID. Yes, you're going to be out there where you shouldn't be and increasing the probability. But I think that more than anything, I'd like to think that our employees appreciate what we have done and would like to make sure that their jobs are continue to be a safety for the future to come. I myself cannot support something like this as much as I would like to, but because if I do, then I'm not acting responsibly for the district as a whole, nor for our employees. If maybe this is something that's going to impact our future budgets. I'd hate to be thinking of, I've gone through in the past of having to let employees go, and it's not a good thing. And once again, I want to make sure that people don't misunderstand what I'm saying as saying that I'm using a scare tactic. I'm not. I've just been through that before, and I don't think that we should be considering something like that that would be impacting on the long term, because there are consequences. We talk about consequences, I mean, what we want to do, but we never really look at those consequences. And reality, that's the reality. Our tax base is going to be what it is. And it's probably going to be less in next year and the year to come because of the businesses that have closed. So where are we going to get money to ensure that we continue to pay our employees, the ones that we have, and have the safety that they have and knowing that they have a job? There's a lot of people that don't have jobs. There's a lot of people that from the university that are not going to have jobs come this next fiscal year for them, because of the fact that they're having to cut down. My department, when I was still there, we were supposed to cut down 10%. And I think that was the message, to cut down 10% of staff. I don't think we want to encounter that. I think our employees and our community want to make sure that we're making decisions that are responsible on the overall picture, not just right now to what might be happening. I think we have done a lot for our employees. So I'm not going to support an amendment, and I don't support this particular action item at this point in time.
And just as like a closing statement, I just want to say I find it ironic that this board was willing to support, for the sake of the entity, the creation of 4 executive level positions, each being paid over 6 figures, because it strengthened the entity in various departments and essential functions. And we were able to find that money in the budget to the tune of, 400+ thousand. And quite frankly, I find it ironic that we're able to do that, but we weren't able to provide hourly staff the full $1 per hour increase, and we went with 50 cents. We didn't find the money for hourly then, but we found the money to, create these executive level positions that were board approved. And now we're saying again that we don't have the money. And the same conversation and rhetoric has echoed every budget cycle when we look at salary and benefit increases. And our district has not gone bankrupt, even though in 2015 I was told that we were going to bankrupt the district by providing for the full cost of healthcare, and we were going to bankrupt the district for giving teachers these hourly or the pay raises that we approved, and fixing compression to the tune of $500,000 is also going to bankrupt the district. And I've yet to see any of those come to pass. So that's all.
Before I recognize Ms. Costilla, I'd like to say that one of my personal goals was to get our hourly paid $15 an hour. I felt like it's fair pay. It would be equal to what some of the other positions pay in the city. And that was my personal goal, that we bring our hourly up to a fair pay. And what I'm hearing is we have to be futuristic, and we have to look at our budget. I know that when Mr. Cardona recommends new staff, that usually he has a place where he's bringing that money from. You could correct me, Mr. Cardona, I don't remember that we had to do a budget transfer for that, did we?
No, those were existing positions.
But we found $400,000 in the budget that was already there to pay those staff members, which is fine. I supported the creation of those positions and those individuals executing those roles and functions across the ISD. But what I'm saying is that money was there. We found it in the budget to do that. But yet we also said that it was going to be hard to find the $300,000 to give everyone $1 an hour increase. So again, I guess we find the money as a board and as a district when we want to, is my point.
Mr. Barton, when you gave us that figure, that $720,000 a month, was that including the positions that we amended this motion to?
Yes, ma'am. That included all hourly positions. If you earn an hourly rate, we calculated it out what that would be over 40 hours. It included all employees earning an hourly wage.
Okay.
So then the original motion that was seconded by Ms. Costilla does satisfy what my amended motion was. If Mr. Barton's budget projection reflected all hourly, then that was the original motion that Mrs. Costilla seconded for purposes of discussion.
Ms. Costilla, you had your hand up?
Clarification, I seconded the item that was on this
the amendment.
discussion and action. I have not seconded an amendment to it. I did want to add that for clarification purposes, Mr. Barton, when you gave us those options a couple of months ago regarding the increases, one of the options that you included was one that I requested, and that was, I think it was $1.50 for auxiliary services. I'm trying to remember, it was option 3. And I don't have it in front of me. And that's the one that I proposed. The one that was passed, if I do recall, was the one that Mr. Arredondo was supporting. And that was at whatever it was based on what our budget was going to be. So it was less than what I had proposed. And that one did not pass.
if you're asking us to revisit hourly rate increases, Mrs. Costilla, I'm more
No,
than
I'm
happy to
not.
put that on
I'm
the
not
August
asking
agenda.
anything. I'm making reference to the fact that you're bringing up a point as far as talking about if we found the money then, and this is what we should have done then. I'm just reminding you of where we were when we passed the budget, that I presented an option that was included there that you did not support. You supported something less. So I just wanted that to be very clear.
Yeah, because of the gloom and doom rhetoric of us always financially bankrupting the district, which we have yet to do. Some of us have done that while on the board, but others haven't.
Are we done with discussion? Oh, Ms. Halsey, would you like to speak?
Thank you. I have a couple questions, and I apologize if this was covered at the very beginning. I had some trouble logging on here. But first, I just wanted to say that I do believe that there are entities in this community that have paid hazard pay to their essential employees. First in mind is HEB. So I think, you know, this isn't a thing that we are inventing. But my first question is, how many teachers, staff, administrators have been on campuses so far since June?
Mr. Cardona, do you have someone to answer that?
We don't, I mean, there's no way to know. We've had teachers and administrators all through summer. I mean, I was at Goodnight the other day and I saw a bunch of teachers up there. We don't track who's been up there visiting or helping out. But as far as like who's been back, I would say 40% of our hourly may be back right now. 35 to 40% of that, you know, non-exempt group. And then our assistant principals, our front office staff, principals, counselors, obviously the 40 plus coaches that volunteered their time this summer to run the strength and conditioning camp. So those 40 plus, I know the band people have been here. I know dance had their program, I want to say 2 weeks ago, maybe, but I don't know that we know there's a lot of people going in and out of the buildings right now.
So, I mean, can you reasonably project to say that we've had 300 staff people regularly on campuses since June?
I mean, I don't know how to answer. I would have to ask the principals that question specifically, like if they're tracking that. I know for us, for example, we have at central office roughly 50 people, and we probably have 30% of the building here each day. So we've staggered what departments come in on what day. You know, all the cabinet members have been here every day during the week. But then each department, payroll, finance, and that group, we stagger their times so that we don't.
Well, and you said that you mentioned that the coaches obviously are coming in on their own time, right, and to do the camps and such. So that's a voluntary commitment. Have administrators also been given the leeway to come in on a voluntary basis?
No, our administrators came back as per their contract. I mean, they were ready to get back.
Then the slide presentation that you showed that it went very quickly, so it was hard for me to catch the details on it. So how many teachers were involved in the planning committee for that plan?
I think Mr. Wozniak may be on this call. He can kind of help answer some, like the nurses were a part of the group. It's kind of been like you have our principals who were back on contract. Dr. Reese Mills has been working with the CIC, but not necessarily on this plan. This plan involved people who were on contract.
Right, so it's a safety plan for the safe return to campus, right? Again, it went really fast, so I was trying to catch it, but we didn't include the voices of the safety concerns of our classroom teachers and how they would address it, and what they were, their fears and their worries and the things that they notice daily happening in their classes that might be a concern?
So there, Adam, did you hear me say the part of the logical step is certain things happen at certain times? Did you hear that part?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so, you know, the principals came back, we started meeting with them, and then you have Mr. Wozniak and Mr. Wyatt, who were director of maintenance and safety. Now they're meeting with the principals. And then the purpose actually of getting the teachers back is so that the teachers can help us craft what a safe return looks like. If you go back and look at, and I'll send you the PowerPoint as soon as we're done, you know, I don't know if you heard the part where I said that, you know, we don't check the principal schedules. We trust for them to do what they're supposed to do. So I'll use Crockett as an example. If the principal says, I don't want all my teachers here, I want to do kindergarten one day, first grade one day, and we want to do some virtual training in a safe manner, they have that leeway, right? But they have to craft that, because part of that return is for the kindergartner teachers. Part of that process is for the third grade teachers to say, our classrooms need to look like this. And then it's our job to support them and get that stuff done. So plexiglass shielding, you know, Bonham Pre-K doesn't have desks. They have tables. So we need to meet with those teachers so we can say, what is it that you need? And then we can build that for you in that period of time until basically October 5th so that it's ready to go. And so they are, in essence, a part of that plan as they return. And we told them this last Thursday. I met with about 400 teachers via Zoom, 500 teachers via Zoom. And they asked about 600 questions. So yes, they did have their chance to ask questions. And so we've created an FAQ for the teachers to help answer some of those questions that Mr. Fernandez is working on. And that's kind of also helping us design a phased-in return. Does that make sense?
I think so. I think what I hear, and I think that sounds good. I think what I hear you saying is that because of the contract situations, we did not convene teachers over the summer who were not on contract to inform this first phase, but we have had other voices informing this phase. And then during the first 3 weeks of professional development, that is not only going to be training teachers to use the curriculum online, right? But also to have the teachers help with the planning processes for guaranteeing the safety when and if we are able to bring kids back to campus.
Correct.
Right? Okay, so my question is then, why can't we convene the teachers and do that first part of planning with the teachers virtually?
Because I don't know if Mr. Wyatt's, you know, on the line, if he wants to chime in, our director of maintenance. We have to examine the physical spaces. Every campus is very unique. And I think it's okay for us to bring back staff members in a safe manner. We've already proven we can do it. And if we're allowed to do it without interruption in the system, I think it will meet the needs of the teachers. You know, I think getting over that anxiety and fear first. And let me correct something. Before we exited the teacher contracts, I did tell all the teachers in a Zoom call, because I held Zoom meetings once every Monday from March through the end. And I was very specific in telling them at the end of their Zoom call on the last one that I would not interrupt their non-contract time. And I've tried to stick to that. That's between me and the teachers. And now I hear, you know, maybe we should have interrupted that, and maybe we should have. I don't know. We're trying to do things in the best interest of them, but I don't think we're going to have any campus bring 100% of their teachers back 100% of the time on the first day. I think that's the reality. Those campuses are going to design their PD and then getting the feedback, but we have to look at the spaces, because every space, like Mendez looks very different than De Zavala, which is under construction. And if it's not ready, obviously none of those teachers are coming back. the Miller teachers, if the campus is not ready. Obviously, none of those teachers are coming back because the principal's got to work a unique plan.
So that's my next question. In the plan, there was something that about campus flexibility at the determination of the administrator, and I don't know what that means, because that is not what I heard you say last week in the board meeting.
Actually, what I said in the board meeting, if you let the superintendent work the plan, I think it will work the way it's supposed to work, which is the way it's working right now. But yes, and I use this example, like, you know, the high school, I think one day took a department to go bowling for team building during PD, right? Campuses do different things. Some principals may do something. We don't check that. Like I leave it to the principals to make sure that they work with their campuses to do what it is they do. And that's what we're doing. That's just a part of the natural process. So, you know, if a principal says, you know, I have X number of teachers that I know their stories and I'm going to work a plan for them, we're going to support them in that plan. The reality is August 17th is when their contract starts, and that's when it starts. What that looks like will be very unique to each campus. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Mr. Wozniak, I got a question, but I've got more. So,
Ms. Halsey, I just wanted to add that I do have 2 teachers on my recovery team meeting, and we've been meeting once a week all summer. Edith from DZ was one of the first people that I met with when I went over to her campus and started kind of laying out the room and what that might look like from a physical safety standpoint. And even recently at the high school, we have weekly meetings, Mr. White and I, with Mr. De Leon, and we've already had the science teacher come up and give us an overview of what they need from a safety standpoint. We're meeting with the cosmetology teacher this week to get a customized view of her room. So yes, as far as my standpoint is concerned, we've been meeting with teachers a lot.
So I think that maybe I hear what you're saying, Mr. Cardona, about, you know, this is when the contract starts. I think that teachers understand that when and if we get to the point where we can safely bring kids back to campus, teachers will also have to be back on campus, right? But we also, you know, we understand that that is going to be dictated by the health situation in the community. And I think what teachers are concerned about is that right now, the health situation in this town and in this county is still very dire, right? We have not turned a corner. We are still a hotspot. And so they're concerned about what they heard was everybody back full time for 3 weeks in an enclosed space, and then everybody stay there for another 4 weeks while the numbers, we don't know what the numbers are going to do. And so I think that if we could communicate better that there is going to be flexibility, and even I think if you could allow teachers to come back at least initially on a voluntary basis, I know that there are teachers who want to do that. They want to come back, and they just don't want to feel like they're being forced to come back, and they want to have the reassurance that their safety precautions are in place and are being followed, and they want to be able to have the flexibility to say that they can work with their campus administrator, their campus administrator, to say, you know, I can really, it'd be great, I'd love to be in for 3 hours, but I need to know that it's staggered, or that I have the flexibility to do this on campus and then do this task from my home classroom. You know, they've all set up home classrooms. They have offices set up in their homes. And I just don't think that they haven't heard that.
Well, I would agree with you 100% if they had that conversation with the superintendent, principals, and us as the staff. I think where some of the confusion has also arisen was there's a lot of stuff going around that I think maybe is created from maybe a lack of communication, from fear and anxiety. And so it's created the situation where we have teachers on their own private Facebook page. And, you know, I don't know what you want me to do. As part of my process is to come back and start meeting with the teachers. Part of that was a couple of teachers emailed me and said, we want to start meeting with Zoom again. We're good with if you start meeting with us again. So that's a part of the natural process. But let that process work. And I think what happens is that sometimes community members get themselves involved in the process, and then it creates issues that aren't necessarily issues. That I think that our principals are more than capable with their communities of solving them. Like
but
our
the
principals,
teachers haven't heard that. The teachers haven't heard that they're going to be given an option. They haven't heard that, and so and it's
some teachers,
many
not all.
teachers.
Some
Many teachers have not heard that, and it's reasonable that they have concerns and that they are fearful while we have active community spread happening. I mean, that's a reasonable fear. I suspect you're afraid. I mean,
I'm
you have
100%.
an impossible job, and I suspect all of your staff is afraid. I mean,
well, I mean, the superintendent's afraid. I think about this all the time.
Right, but saying to people, you just have to get over that, which is what they're hearing, well, while we're still a hot spot, doesn't really gel, right? There's some dissonance there for people when you tell them to just get over it, even though.
Well, I don't know that I've told anybody to just get over it.
I don't think that's what you've said explicitly, but I'm saying when you say you just said in the meeting, right, just a few minutes ago, that they're concerned, they're fearful, they have to work through that, right? But even saying they have to work through that in this particular circumstance, while the virus is still very active in our community and our state numbers continue to just accelerate, they hear just get over it, right? They don't hear you saying, I trust you, I respect you, I want you all to be safe so that you can safely then teach our children, right? They hear just get over that, and then it's very hard to hear anything else after that.
Well,
if we had no cases, if we were one of those counties wherever they are that had no cases and things were fine, and then you said come back, like that seems to me like, yes, come back, work through your fears, work through your existential anxieties here. But that's not the situation we're in now, which is, I think, why people are so upset.
I think there are some people upset. I think that, if that is what the majority of board wants this administration to think of, then I think we need to have an honest discussion about, do we keep because I heard Trustee Arredondo talk about our child nutrition workers and all that. Do we keep feeding our community, or do we take the safety of those employees and do we pull them back? Because I'm going to tell you that's a big thing with me right now. And maybe that's just my own fault. Like maybe that's my problem that I need to self-reflect on. And there are many issues that I have to self-reflect on. But, our child nutrition people have been out on the front lines.
I know. Yeah.
And yet what I hear from you, Ms. Halsey, is our teachers can't do a similar phased approach. And I want to remind everybody that when this pandemic first started, we had trustees who wanted us to open every campus as a feeding site. And we had all these things that we wanted to happen. And I said, just let us work the process. And I think the process worked for the most part. I think it worked really well because our people are amazing. And we didn't have our first case unfortunately, we didn't have our first case of COVID in child nutrition till summer. And that was a result of something that happened off campus, this infamous Zumba thing. But I mean, we have to start bringing people in a phased approach to help us navigate something none of us know how to deal with right now.
I understand. I know you are in an impossible situation. We are asking you to do the impossible, and you have done a wonderful job at it thus far. You're right. Your process worked. We minimized. How many employees now? I've heard of maybe 3 or 4 that have contracted it.
I would say, I can't speak for HR, but I would say it's probably less than 5%. So
of the people who've been back.
Out of the 1,300. Out of the 1,300 total employees, less than 5%.
Right. So minimizing the health risk is obviously everybody's objective, right? And so that phased-in process seems to have been handled well and is working, right?
So I normally send, we do a welcome back letter. So maybe once I send this PowerPoint to y'all. We can incorporate some of that. And maybe I think that'll alleviate some fears. But I don't know how else to alleviate fears because I told them that on Thursday. I mean, I literally told, now there was 100 teachers not on that call, so I can't speak for them.
But I mean, I think there are other alternatives for how to alleviate those fears. Austin AISD is doing all of their professional development online. Lockhart is doing all of their professional development online. There, other districts are allowing teachers to come back on a voluntary basis. I think that there are other alternatives, right? And I know that you have all of their best interests at heart. I know that about you as a person. I know that about you.
Yeah, I don't feel that right now. I don't feel that.
I'm telling you what I know.
And I appreciate that, but that's not how I feel.
But that's what I'm telling you. I know that about you. But I'm saying that I know that you're trying to communicate a message, but I'm not sure that the message that you're actually communicating right now is being heard in the way that you intended.
Correct. No, I agree with you. I agree with you, but that's, that's a part of the restart up, right? I'm getting ready to meet with teachers. We're doing, our weekly calls, and I think that'll alleviate some fears, but that's just a natural that's the natural process. And it's a little different this year because
it's not the natural process in this situation. I mean, I totally understand what you're saying about child nutrition workers and maintenance workers, and I've been praying for those people every day since this has happened. I also am very concerned about them, but I'm also incredibly concerned about what happens to them when we bring 900 more people back to campuses. They are our most vulnerable employees. They get paid the least. They're in the highest risk categories. And
they're the ones that want to come every day. They're the ones who fight us. They are the ones who fight us.
So let's not put them in more danger. Let's not put them in more danger while we are in such an active hotspot. If we're talking about, if this were November and everything has gotten so much better, I would say absolutely, yes, that's the process we should be following, but this is not a regular circumstance by any means. And so I think we have to go an extra step, like 17 extra steps. And I know that you're doing that, but I'm just saying, I think that has not been communicated to the teachers and to the staff as a whole. And if we can't find a way to communicate that very clearly, I think that this is just very scary for me.
President Cantu, if I may briefly, I know this has gone on a little while, but
Yes,
I too have serious concerns with the way the communication flows have gone. But I think that in this circumstance, we as individual trustees at times have been undermining the administration's ability to communicate with the teachers by sending mixed messages, by saying, bring your problems to me, and you positioning yourself as the voice of you've heard these teachers are saying this, teachers don't feel heard. I mean, you don't speak for them monolithically. And the administration can't do their job if we keep getting in the way. I mean, he has their health paramount, and he's who we've hired to handle it and to deal with the staff and to take care of them. And none of us are qualified to sit in that chair. And I just think in a time like this, we could be more supportive.
I understand that, Mr. McLaughlin, but I also, I won't apologize for the fact that teachers trust me and call me up. I'm sorry, that it's true, and I won't apologize for that because I love our teachers. I trust them to teach my own children, and as I know you do too. And so, if they ask me to be a voice for them, and I think that they have legitimate and sincere concerns that are reasonable for people to have, then I will voice those concerns. Yeah.
But they don't speak with one. You can talk to 10 teachers and hear 10 different things, and you've amplified one specific view of.
No, I haven't. I've talked. No, that's not one specific view. It's the view of many people.
Well,
thank you.
You must just.
You don't have to believe me about that, but I'm telling you the truth.
We must
that
run
I know
into.
to be true.
I didn't mean to interrupt. We must run into completely different subsets of folks then, because everything I've heard has been a completely different view. But I don't say I've heard from these folks, I therefore speak on their behalf. And no, I say this is the administration. If we don't trust the administration and do the job we've hired them to do, that's an issue that we need to deal with on that level, right? But if we do, we can't say, oh, I mean, it's great, this is you, but I want you to do it this way, right? And because that's not what we do. I mean, I've had parents, I haven't had any teachers approach me about this, but I've had a dozen parents or so send me emails and worried about the teachers. I mean, I think there's a way the teachers can communicate. And if the teacher's communication process with their campus administration and their central administration is broken, then we need to figure out a way to fix it. But we don't, as individual trustees, need to get in the way of it, because that's counterproductive. I mean, it's undermining the administration's authority and position and acting like this board doesn't support them, when I think this board broadly does. But that's not what it looks like if you just take a snapshot on Facebook or the paper. And I think I'm not blaming, I understand wanting to be active and wanting to do something when you're in a position of leadership, but I think we all have to be pointing in the same direction in order for this to go the way we all want it to go.
Right, and I think that the things that I have said publicly have been to follow the process that the superintendent set up at the meeting. He said that if teachers had concerns, they should write to HR and express their concerns, and that you were going to take care of them, Mr. Cardona. So that's my question, is actually my last question is, how many teachers as of Friday had sent emails to HR expressing concerns, and how many teachers had completed the Google form that HR sent out?
Dr. Baez, are you still here with us? Dr. Baez?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any counts for Ms. Halsey?
We've had an additional 35 folks reach out on Friday, and we are reaching out and communicating
For a
with those
total of
folks.
what?
Close to.
I'd like a total number of emails and Google forms.
Sure, I can get that for you.
Please.
Do you need time to calculate that and get back to us?
She
Yes.
does, because some of them are duplicate forms.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's,
Ms.
last I
Hall-
saw it was 102 and then 35. And so, but of that 137, I don't know how many are duplicates. So that's what they were trying to go through today. But, you know, they've been staying here till 8 o'clock calling people to walk them through the process. So we'll get that to you as soon as she can remove the redundant requests.
Thank you.
I know that this is a tough time for trustees as well as administrators. It's a pandemic that we've never had to deal with. It's one that our superintendent didn't get training for. And I know that each individual board has their own concerns, but I do feel like we all support Mr. Cardona. We support what he's trying to do. And if there's been a lack of communication, I trust Mr. Cardona will fix that. I think that the apprehension and the anxiety is prevalent in the community because it's basically the fear of the virus. And it flows over into your job, into your family, into your social situations. Are we about ready to call for a vote, or is there anyone that has something they have to say? Now, I think we need to vote on the amendment first.
Well, Ms. Costilla didn't second. I don't think
Oh.
anyone the amendment.
Ms. Halsey
Okay,
Ms.
so,
Halsey
seconded your amendment.
okay, so since the amendment was not seconded,
Well, just kidding.
then
Sorry.
then the original item 3, discussion action to pay paraprofessional auxiliary employees time and a half, their hourly rate for each hour worked up to 40 hours per week beginning on August 4th, 2020 until discontinued by the Board of Trustees. Please raise your hand if you are in favor of this. 2. Raise your hand if you're opposed to this. 1, 2, 3.
Can't see Ms. Costilla.
Is Ms.
Ms.
Costilla
Cantu,
present?
I'm opposed to it. I don't know what happened to my, here,
To your video?
yeah. Can you see me now? I'm
Yes, I
opposed
can
to
see
it. My
you.
vote is opposed.
Okay, so 2 in favor, 4 against.
Can you name the ones who are in favor and against?
Ms. Halsey and Mr. Arredondo are in favor. Cantu, Hanson, McLaughlin, and Costilla are against.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're ready to begin the agenda prep unless y'all need a 5-minute break. Okay, let's continue. Mr. Cardona.
Madam President, Mr. Fernandez put it on. It's a fairly short agenda, but I'll go to item 5A, which is academic update. Ms. Presley and Dr. Ruiz-Mills, and I believe also our new social studies instructional coach, Mr. Abdel, will be providing an update on African American and Mexican American studies that I think was requested from the last board meeting. We'll also have a middle school math curriculum update from Ms. Zeiger, and Ms. Ruiz-Mills can correct that if it's incorrect.
No, you're correct, sir. The African American, Mexican American Studies update will just talk about the TEKS if they're approved by the August board meeting. The middle school math curriculum update will just refresh everybody's memory on how we've realigned those TEKS since we do 8th grade algebra for all.
Mr. Sandoval will provide a construction update, probably more so around De Zavala and Miller, because those are approaching completion. Item 6, approval of consent agenda items. Item 6A, approval of minutes for regular scheduled board meeting on July 20th, 2020, and special call board meeting on August 3rd, 2020. Item 7A, consider approval of budget amendments, and Mr. Barton's on this call if there's currently any.
Yes, sir. We have 3 right now. The first one is salary for the community services position that we have in partnership with the city of San Marcos. The board approved that last year, but they've now invoiced us for that. The second one is for some uniforms for athletics that was out of China and was just delayed, and so it didn't come in time. And the third is the final for the bus. And again, these are roll forwards, the uniforms and the child nutrition bus, things that we were expecting in the last budget year, but did not come in on time.
Item 7B, consider acceptance of certified appraisal rolls for the San Marcos Consolidated Independent School District. It's also Mr. Barton.
Yes, sir. We've received all of our values, and Ms. Hanson said it correctly that Hayes was not able to do a complete, I guess, certification, but they are able to certify their estimates. So we'll have that, and it is an estimate. So the value is a little bit, I guess it's incomplete.
Item 7C, consider ordinance setting the 2020 tax rate.
That's our standard procedure. I'm echoing on somebody. And so we will bring you your standard tax rate for M&O and INS. I'm working on having 2 options for the trustees as they asked on the INS rate.
Item 7D, consider acceptance of effective tax rate and rollback tax rate for the year 2019 for San Marcos CISD.
That's our truth in taxation.
Item 7E, consider to delegate contractual authority to obligate the school district under Texas Education Code to the superintendent solely for the purpose of obligating the district under TEC 48257 and TEC Chapter 49, subchapters A and D, and the rules adopted by the Commissioner of Education as authorized under TEC 49.006. This included approval of the agreement for the purchase of attendance credit.
This is the HB3 version of the agenda item trustees are used to seeing, which said if we were to pay recapture, how would we do it? And it would be through the purchasing of attendance credits. It's a lot wordier than we're used to, but that's just the version they're using now. Essentially, if we do owe recapture, it would be netted out or taken away from our state funding.
And then 7F, consider Exhibit A and B to the election order.
We brought trustees the order of elections last month so that we were not bringing them on the deadline, which is the 17th. But we did not have the election sites yet. That wasn't happening until the first week of August. That will be done by August 17th. And so we'll present that to the trustees. To be honest, that could probably go under consent. It just needs to be in the board book so they can see where those election sites are.
And then I did mention, I would just want to reiterate there, while the board did grant me the authority to potentially extend based on the county health data for an additional 4 weeks. We were informed by legal that we needed to do another item for board approval and then submit a waiver to TEA. So Dr. Reeves-Mills will be adding that.
And Superintendent Cardona and Board of Trustees, I will bring that waiver to the August board meeting, but also we may have to add under consent or action some dialogue to the student code of conduct, just referencing appropriate online learning policies and potentially what our school dress code will look like if and when students return pertaining to the masks.
Mr. Cardona, on the schedule, just I want to make sure I understand. I thought TA had given you the authority to make the first 4 weeks virtual.
Correct.
And then we didn't take any action at the last meeting with regard to the extension for weeks 5 through 8. We did discuss it, but we didn't vote it.
Maybe that's why he sent us a thing that we would need approval. So
that'll be on this agenda.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Ms. Halsey, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I have an item that I would like to add, and I'm not sure exactly where it fits. I'm happy to get with Mr. Cruz if we think that's necessary, but I would like the board to discuss our policy concerning the broadcasting and recording of our meetings, given that we now have online, like this meeting that's happening now, my understanding is that it's being recorded, but that it's not being live streamed. But we did have an action item on it. So I just think that maybe because we're now a new meeting format for everybody that sometimes is a hybrid, that we should revisit our policy and discuss how that looks so that we can try to be as consistent and uniform as possible. So I don't know, I can get with Mr. Cruz on the wording with that, or if you want to figure out the wording, Mr. Superintendent, it's.
I can get, he started sending me some TASB things, but I don't think he understood what you were trying to ask me. So maybe we might loop you in on something. Like I'll reach out to you if we need to get you involved and how you want the wording, but yeah.
Okay. But I would like that item on the August agenda, please.
Okay.
Ms. Halsey, like with the idea that if there's an action item, we stream it?
Yes. And also how we're, like what meetings are being recorded, what meetings aren't, like what is the policy? How, right? Because now these are different formats that we are suddenly engaging in.
Okay. So I will say that we typically default to YouTube on 99%, but like this recording we'll have to send to technology who will then put it into YouTube so that it can be put out on our website. But I think that's part of the confusion we're trying to clear up. Yeah.
Did you have anything further to add, Superintendent Cardona, on how things are going, or have we covered everything already?
I think we covered everything, but I do think that Ms. Halsey has a good point, and so we'll make sure we send something out to our teachers. Dr. Reeves-Mills did notify me that, and I'll let the board know that our PD is already scheduled to be all online modules. And so I think that maybe we haven't done a good job of messaging, like the principals will determine how those teachers accomplish their online PD module. So we don't have any PD that's actually face-to-face. It is online. And so I think that allows us a lot of flexibility.
I think that people understood that the modules would be online, but I think the concerns that they were having is whether or not they would be in groups of 10 in libraries or required to be 8 hours a day in their own classrooms, or if they would be given the option of being in their classroom or the option of doing the professional development from home. They're concerned about all being in the same place at the same time, even if it's in their individual classrooms with their own children in the classrooms for 8 hours a day. Right? That seems to me the concern that I've been hearing.
Yeah, we'll clear up that miscommunication.
Thank you.
Anything else from any other trustee? Do I hear a motion?
I move that we adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. McLaughlin. All in favor?
Aye.
Raise your hands. And Mr. Arredondo, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm voting in favor to adjourn.
Thank you. 6. Any opposed? 0. Thank you all.
Thank you.